Well, good morning. Welcome to Stand Together. We're going to get started here right on time. We're hoping the rain is just going to hold up for us. My name is Mandy Kimes. I've lived here in Ripon for the last 9 years. I work for a Christian campus ministry called His House Christian Fellowship, and I serve as a minister to students at Ripon College. A few weeks ago, I attended a panel at a church in Appleton with a group of diverse pastors and the police chief of Appleton. They came together to discuss racism and recent events. They began the discussion by explaining that there would likely be some uncomfortable moments, but that it shouldn't keep us from leaning into tough conversations. One pastor shared how he couldn't help but imagine himself or even his son on the ground when he painfully watched the murder of George Floyd. Chief Thomas shared about his love and his commitment to the community he serves, and also how difficult this time has been for his family, particularly his daughter. At one point, the discussion grew heated when a young black man voiced his real pain and feelings of being unheard. After a lot of listening and learning, this man and the police chief were able to come together and embrace as two men who had seen and heard each other's perspectives. In that moment, the divisions and barriers between them seemed far less daunting. Eyes and ears were open to the reality and problem of racism, some for the very first time. That is when the idea for today started to form. It began with a great deal of prayer from my heart, and eventually I reached out to our police chief. He shared with me about some of his own struggles in the recent weeks and the intentional work his department does to protect and serve here in Ripon. I took time to talk with more police and their families, as well as many people of color who live in our community. As conversations continued, I saw an increasing need for a time of unity, a time to stand together against racism, and a time to learn how we can do this important work together. One event won't be the answer to what our community needs, but it is a great place to start. My hope is that we will leave here today ready to take the small and big steps in our own hearts, homes, and here in Ripon. Unity doesn't simply come by wishing for it or declaring it, gathering here in one place. It doesn't imply that we are all the same or that we don't disagree. Instead, it is the state of being made whole by combining different things. Priscilla Shirer is quoted saying, "Unity does not mean sameness. It means oneness of purpose." So how do we work for real unity rather than just the appearance of it? The first step to real, lasting unity are relationships. The real work of unity happens when we commit to growing in love and humility, when we listen even when it's uncomfortable, when we move from tolerating each other to actually valuing each other. The work is hard and it will take time, but this work is worth it. I love our community, and I believe we have so much good to build on. In my recent conversations, I have gained new understanding I wouldn't otherwise have had, and I hope that today you'll be able to say the same. So, are you ready to lean into a time of listening and learning? Yeah? All right, I like that. In a time where tension and division are the norm, what if Ripon could be different? What if we refuse to be divided by our differences? What if it didn't have to be us versus them? I'm so grateful that you've already taken a step today by showing up, taking the time to be here, and I'm hopeful about what good could come from it. I'm also so thankful for the courage of those who've agreed to share today, so let's be sure to make them feel really appreciated and respected as they share. The purpose of today is twofold: to stand together for equal treatment of all who call Ripon home, and also to stand together against racism. Racism is a system of advantage based on race, involving cultural messages, misuse of power, and institutional bias, in addition to the racist beliefs and actions of individuals. Racism is evil, and it's a real problem. We face it in our nation and in our community. Being anti-racist means more than ridding yourself of racist attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. It means actively fighting against them. Hassan Minhaj says that racism has a very quick expiration date when exposed to actual contact with people. So together we can make Ripon a more welcoming and inclusive community for all. And our program today has a very simple agenda. We're going to listen and learn, reflect and respond. Our first opportunity to listen and learn is for us to hear from our mayor, Ted Grant. Come on up, Ted.
Good morning, and I would like to welcome you to this event celebrating and promoting unity within our community. In these difficult times, we need to stand against racism and stand for equality and diversity in our community and our country. The first step to overcoming racism is to identify it within ourselves. Only then can we educate ourselves to overcome these qualities. We can learn from others around us, learn from their experiences, learn about their cultures, share with them your experiences and your cultures. Don't be afraid to have difficult conversations. These are difficult issues. However, when having these conversations, be calm and respectful. Some people who have those opposing viewpoints may not know why their viewpoints are offensive to you or others. We must educate them to help them see the truth. Do not be afraid to tell someone that you take offense, but when you do, be ready to calmly explain why you take offense. The key here is education. We must all become teachers of unity and inclusiveness. Diversity makes us stronger as a species and as a community. We must stand together, or when we stand together, we make our community a united and welcoming place. So stand together, stand strong. Be safe, stay healthy, and remember to be kind, considerate, and respectful to others. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, we're going to continue this time of listening and learning by hearing from members of our community. So if you are one of those people, you can come stand up here with me. Some who are actually here in person and some who have offered their experience to be shared today. And so I will be reading those. In my conversations with community members, I have learned so much. I've heard amazing stories of our neighbors, our teachers, our police, our pastors, truly showing love and compassion, helping when needed. I've talked with officers and their families to better understand the work they do and the risks they face. One of my friends, he shared how living here as a Black man, he feels like officers have gone out of their way for him and how thankful he is for that. Some explained how fearful they are to speak up and how hurtful it has been when they have tried to in the past, but they weren't listened to or believed. For one new friend, growing up here in Ripon meant that at 8 years old, she was told at school that she looked like poop for having brown skin. She concluded asking for us to put ourselves in her shoes and imagine how that would feel. I hope as we listen to these individuals that we would listen with empathy and see what we can learn from what we hear today. As I'm reading people that have submitted their things to be read, I will be sharing their names if they'd like that, and also a description of them to help understand their experience. But first I want to welcome up LP.
Just so that you guys are aware, I'm going to be reading, okay? All right, so good morning to everyone in attendance. I would personally like to thank you all for being here. These conversations, while tough, are important. And to attempt to ignore or escape these conversations does us as a community no good in terms of providing a home for any and everyone regardless of background and identity. With that being said, I must admit that I was reluctant to share my thoughts concerning my own experiences as a Black man in Ripon. For any time I have attempted to share with the community, I have often been met with the products of white fragility. Denial, blame, anger, defensiveness, and my personal favorite, calling me the racist for implying that racism could possibly exist in Ripon. I would like to reiterate, as I have for years, that I personally don't believe that the town of Ripon is inherently racist. I do, however, contend that members of our community have threatened my right to humanity through displays of white entitlement, microaggressions, and outright displays of racist behavior. Ripon is white. We can be real about that. Ripon is white. And we must hold ourselves accountable and work to do our town and to work to rid our town of the white fragility that, if left unaddressed, would make it increasingly difficult for people of color to truly feel valued as equals while here. Because most members of the Ripon community have been awesome with me and were very pleasant with me until I became vocal about my experiences. Approximately 2 years back, I sought to hold my institution of employment, Ripon College, accountable for where we were falling short in educating our students concerning how to navigate the world within their identities and how to use that privilege that's afforded to them through their identities to support each other, and to also how to better support our students of color. My place of employment responded well and made the appropriate changes. In my comments, I also sought to communicate what I felt was important for the city of Ripon to know. It's just as much our job as community members to provide a welcoming space for students of color. So how were my comments received? The very real experiences belonging to my students of color and I were used as clickbait and picked apart for an opinion piece. The comments from Ripon community members under the articles called me a liar and sarcastically quipped, "He must be clairvoyant." They utilized the experiences of other black people that never spoke of any prejudice or racism in Ripon in an attempt to silence my students and I. Ironic, because these individuals are the first to say not all white people are racist, but yet fail to recognize that the black experience is not one of a monolith. And the inability to recognize as such tells me that they aren't capable of grappling with the nature of the black reality and how it is subconsciously interacted with by their white fragility. I have been informed on several occasions that black people in this town are genuinely afraid of having a transparent conversation concerning their experiences in this town. Some saw how I was responded to and were turned off at the possibility of doing so since the city of Ripon is so small, and hence the effects of social ostracism will be felt almost immediately. They fear that routine activities such as grocery shopping would be made difficult by the stares and whispered comments. I have lived this. They fear that a lunch meeting will be interrupted by older white men demanding that they answer for their own experiences. They fear the white entitlement to their black experience. I have lived this. They fear that their experiences will become nothing short of an academic matter, something to be argued and debated about rather than a matter of humanity. I have lived this. I have been loved and accepted by this community. Community members have prayed for me. Community members have fought to educate themselves to better understand my experience. Community members have treated me as one of their own. But also, I've also had people settle down to eat, see me, stare at me, and leave restaurants while staring at me in this community. I have had the position I hold at the college challenged several times because I don't look like a hall director. I've been around white people usually using the word nigger, whom frantically leave spaces after realizing I may or may not have heard them. No apologies followed. It should not take my existence as a black man in certain spaces for white people to feel uncomfortable saying such a thing. Before my next point, I'd like to illustrate the awesome relationship that I have with the Ripon Police Department. Through my work at the college, I've been able to develop a wonderful relationship with the department and several of their officers. We're on a nickname basis. I can call them whenever I need their assistance at the college. They all have my personal cell number and can call me when they need information. I can play punch some of them, and they'll playfully ball up. We even roast each other sometimes. They are a part of the reason why I felt so welcome and safe in the town I was once afraid to move to. However, my past experiences with the police, not particularly in this town, but just in our nation, didn't make this an easy relationship to develop. As such, I've committed the crime of walking while black in this community and have had the police called on me for seemingly innocent things. When approached, they quickly realized who I was and just turned it into an opportunity to catch up and crack jokes. But due to my past experiences with police in this country, I've always left these interactions afraid that they possibly could have turned out differently had not my connection with them been developed through my role at the college. And this is not an indictment of our Ripon Police Department. This is an indictment of things at large. I have been followed and threatened in this community. I have also been called a nigger in this community. But why haven't you talked about these experiences before, LP? Because I've tried to before. I've been silenced by people whom refuse to believe that something so ugly can live not only in their community, but in their own subconscious minds. Members of this community refuse to first look in the mirror and then at their neighbor to combat the isms that plague our country. We all live in a country less than 100 years removed from legal segregation. Real, institutional, systematic, legal segregation. Work has been done that I am eternally grateful for, but more work is needed. Ripon is great, but Ripon is not immune to the lingering effects of our country's history. The effects of what has transpired and the systems that have been built into place for the past 400 years don't just disappear just because we said that they did. Imagine it being that easy. And just as with any other work, your efforts are only effective if you choose to educate yourself. If you refuse to look in the mirror and to hold yourself accountable for educating yourself, honestly, your help isn't needed. Everyone else, I hope that you found the cliff notes of my experience as a Riponite for the past 4 years enlightening to a degree. Please continue to do the work necessary so that any black persons deciding to live here have a less chance of experiencing the things that I have experienced. I leave Ripon on June 30th, 2020, and I do so loving this place and trusting that those I've come to love here will honor today's messages by continuing to do the work necessary. I love everyone in this space and everyone that's ever been an ally for me. Please continue to do well by each other, and farewell.
Thank you so much, LP. This next experience comes from Claire Wenting, a Chinese American who lives in Ripon currently. Having lived in Ripon for 2 years, I felt like people in our small town are in general very kind and friendly. At least no one was rude in front of my face. But I was surprised when I heard about a woman who grew up in the area who was called names like Squinty Eyes and was picked on in school as she grew up, even though she's only 1/4 Asian. I started to wonder how people really feel about people of color in their hearts, and if their kids would have learned to look at their classmates differently and to humiliate them. Since I was stuck in the house during the coronavirus pandemic, I decided it wouldn't be too bad of an idea to watch a documentary series with my family. This film talked about the hardships of early Asian Americans experienced and their unsung achievements. Episode 1 described how Chinese immigrants built the Transcontinental Railroad in the late 1800s. Chinese workers had to use dynamite to clear the way in the mountains. Avalanches constantly threatened to bury them alive. Through all danger, they completed the railroad. But at the Golden Spike, got it. No. Love your guy. Yeah. This happened to me last weekend too. Figure it out. All right. At the Golden Spike ceremony on May 10th, 1869, there was not a single Chinese face in the crowd because Chinese workers were not allowed to attend. Hearing this, I felt thoughts boil in my head. This is so unfair. How can human beings treat other human beings like this? Meanwhile, proudness swelled in my chest. My ancestors worked so hard to make a living from dirt, and even through inequality, they persisted and contributed a lot to America. I am Chinese American, and I am proud to be Chinese American. When Asians immigrated to the US, they were mistreated, tortured, and called devils. Now, while the coronavirus is tearing apart the world, Asian Americans are facing similar prejudice and are being attacked and villainized. As an Asian American, it is my responsibility to tell the truth of my heritage. History is cycling back. We could not let history repeat itself. When I heard that my friend's kid was getting picked on and called Chinese virus, I felt disheartened and wondered if my kids will experience the same things. When I watched a video that shows an enraged woman spitting and hurling slurs at an Asian woman walking her dog, demanding she stay in Asia for spreading the virus, I wonder how much humiliation each Asian American might be facing every day, but we hardly ever hear about it. When I heard that a woman suffered severe burns across her body when someone sneaked up on her and splashed her with a caustic substance just because she's Asian, I felt insecure to get out of my house alone for a long time. The virus eliminated my illusion that Asian Americans are treated the same way as any other race. Asian Americans are still seen as forever foreigners, no matter how long they've lived in this country. Thank you, Claire. Up next, we're going to hear from Haley and Rose.
Good morning to all you beautiful and beloved people that have decided to set out on a journey of personal growth, reflection, and conversation by attending today's open dialogue and bridge building event. My name is Haley Madsen, and as many of you know, I'm a treatment foster mom and have been fostering for about 5 years. My fiance, Carl Ellis, was the first Black foster parent to be licensed in Fond du Lac County, as told to us by our licensing social worker, who had worked for Fond du Lac County for 30 plus years. Our family is blended, transracial, and culturally diverse. My daughter is Haitian American. One of my stepchildren is Mexican American, and 2 are biracial, Black and Caucasian. Currently, Carl and I are caring for multiple children of color as well. I've always been aware of racial injustices, both in the States and internationally. But what I want to share with you now is when it became strikingly clear to me that I have been parenting with white privilege. When I first became a licensed foster home, we were trained that many of the children entering the foster care system had significant trauma. At times that trauma would be triggered by things I was aware of and things I was not. While fostering a Black child, they experienced trauma-triggering episode, and this child escalated. It was apparent to me that I needed to help, intervene, if you will. My only option to keep this child safe and to ensure my safety was to call law enforcement. Believe me when I say, I had no idea what to expect or how they would really be of assistance. When the police officers arrived, I believe it was Officer Middlestat and Boyer, I let them in the front door and shared with them the situation and my concerns over this child's safety. They followed me back to the child's room. As soon as the child saw the officers, it escalated even worse. At the time, I didn't know that this child had significant police interaction prior to living in my home, and it was not positive by any means. I remember as if it was yesterday, putting my hands up at the officer, silently instructing them to stop, directing them to stay at the door of the child's room. They honored my request and stated that they would follow my lead. Our goal was to get the child to the hospital. I explained to this child that the police were not there for them. They were there to support me in getting them the help and support we needed. The officers followed my every lead. For almost an hour, they stood in the hall, knelt down on the door by the door to be less threatening, and let me lead the child out of the house, all while I told them where they needed to be in order to protect the life of this child. By the time we got the child out of the house, we had hoped the child could be transported in my car. That unfortunately was not an option for their safety. So the child and I crawled into the back of the squad car, and not without resistance from the child. As we drove to the hospital, I wondered how we would get the child inside without incident. We pulled up to the ambulance bay, and the officers opened the door to the squad on the side that I was seated. I crawled out first, with the officer standing directly behind me. As I was trying desperately to convince the child to come out of the vehicle, I briefly turned my head around towards the officer, only to look directly into the body cam that was turned on. Panic set in. What would happen if this child runs? We've seen it played out on TV time and time again. Black and brown people being shot in the back. With tears in my eyes, I pleaded with the child to keep their eyes on me. Focus on my voice. As a foster parent, I'm not physically able to restrain a child, but I can hold their hands, guide their bodies, and that's what I did as I pleaded for the child to focus on me. By the grace of God that night, I was able to safely get the child into the hospital without incident. I cannot think or talk about that incident and what happened after entering the hospital without my heart racing, hands shaking, or crying, because secondary trauma is real. But here's what I will share with you. The officers that responded to the call that night handled that situation with the most compassion, respect, and trauma-informed care. But don't mistake my gratitude for how they responded for foolish naivety. Part of the reason why recalling that night is so difficult is because I often think of all the Black and brown children and adults with trauma that don't make it home. I am not naive to the fact that I was a white mother calling for police help. I often wonder what would happen if a Black mother would have called for the same assistance. Would they have let her take the lead? Would they have provided time for that mother to try and help de-escalate her child? Would the police have been more impatient and decided that in order to keep the child safe, they would restrain the child? Because that does happen. I think as a small community, we are blessed to know and have relationships with our law enforcement. Not every community is afforded the same privilege. Now imagine how that scenario may have played out differently. As a white foster mother, it is my responsibility to know and recognize my privilege, and also understand the trauma triggers related to law enforcement with my foster children. For the goal of every mother, foster, adoptive, biological, is to make sure that their children come home safely. Thank you. This is my daughter, Rose.
Hi, my name is Felicity Rose Madsen. It is hard being Black. I get uncomfortable when people look at my family. It is like my family is different than other families. Last year I said I wanted to be like people who were at my school. They were white and they fit in better. I feel like I was not meant to be here. Then I realized I'm unique. I also do not like it when anyone touches my hair except when I'm getting it done. Why is it like this? Some people will never understand how hard it is. Not all white police officers are bad. Some are good. I hope the violent protests end and the peaceful protests keep going. I don't think it's people's fault they are Black. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. Now I want to talk about two friends whose name are Tegan and Kennedy. They are both white. Why would they want to become friends with me? I am Black. Tegan should. She would become friends with anyone at any time, no matter what skin color. She also said she thought that the problem was fixed years ago by Martin Luther King Jr. She wants everyone to live in peace. Kennedy said because of my personality, she said I'm kind, and because she said people can become friends with anyone even if they don't have the same skin tone. Thanks for listening.
And it's okay to just have to feel, some of that and just sit with that in our hearts. I'm so thankful for you, Rose and Haley. Thank you for sharing. Oh. Sometimes the kids in our community can say things that, in a way, we need to hear that gets right to our heart. And so that was really special. Ooh. All right, I'm going to read another experience. This is from Jean Rigdon, who's a white woman who lives here in Ripon. I grew up in Fond du Lac during the 70s and 80s. During that time, Fond du Lac had very little diversity. Growing up, I never heard of any of my family members use the N-word, but I heard other slang expressions for African Americans like colored, darkies, chocolate drops. I also grew up in a religious family where we attended church every Sunday. So when I left for college, the first in my family to do so, I saw a whole new world. I went to a university that had a more diverse population. I met and became friends with students from different backgrounds, and even joined the gay lesbian student group as an ally. I joined the Cultural Diversity Club and started attending conferences where I learned more about being a leader and how to make changes. I found my beliefs changing to becoming more accepting of differences and very open-minded. Love is love, and we all deserve to be treated fairly and equally. As a woman, I believed that I could do anything I wanted to help others who had been minimized by society, to do anything that they wanted. As I married and had children, my husband and I wanted our daughters to be very respectful of everyone. We told them it wouldn't matter to us who they loved, boy or girl. We wanted them to be open-minded and compassionate to people. The reason I wanted to share this backstory with you is because one day my daughter told me she was dating someone and he was African American. And I had an internal struggle with myself. My experiences with racism and bias were called into question. I was now in a real position to make an impact. On one hand, I was happy for her to have found someone that she enjoyed spending time with and wanted to get to know him. But on the other hand, I had lots of questions. The questions that plagued me made me wonder if I was asking myself those questions because the young man was African American, or I was asking myself those questions because I was a caring mom. Would I ask myself those same questions if the boy was white? Would I worry as much if he was white? This was a difficult time for me in my journey and my development of my own beliefs about race. Upon further reflection and consultation with a few others, I realized that I would have probably had many of the same questions about any person who was dating my daughter, who at the time was 16. I think the fact that he was African American made me more aware of stereotypes that I had grown up with, and I think I had to work through them. I don't believe that I ever reacted to him in a way that would make him uncomfortable or asked any questions to him that I wouldn't have asked another person dating my daughter, but I think it was good that this situation made me reflect on the way I was raised. We have a choice. We can either stand on the sides and watch as things happen to each other, or we can step up and do our part to make a difference. I am choosing to make a difference. Thanks, Jean, for sharing that. Up next, we're going to hear from Luis.
Hello, everyone. So I'll be sharing. This is just something personal. I was 13 when I came to Ripon, straight from Mexico, and I was afraid. I didn't speak no English at all, nothing. Nada. And having I don't know, the community in Ripon was so welcoming. So pretty much what I have is just nothing negative. I'm not saying that I don't know. I'm not saying that there's negative, things about Mexicans. I talk to other people, other Hispanic people, and then they have encounters with people. They're just negative people. But as far as my personal opinion, my family, my kids, the community's been great to us. So, just one encounter though, with my wife, she told me one time she was coming from Douglas Street, and there was a police that started following her all the way to Dollar General by, it used to be Family Video. And that was just one thing though, but I'm like, the way the police was following her, it was kind of weird, but that was the only thing that I can think of. But otherwise, no, I don't know. I just don't take things very personal, because the same issues that we have here in the United States, it's the same issues that we have in any country. You know, coming from Mexico, you know, we have Mexicans that are a little darker, lighter, and it's the same stuff that we go through in Mexico. So I don't think it's about being white or whatever. I think it's just the heart, you know, people's heart. We have to be open to get to know people for who they are, and so that's why I don't take anything negative. If I ever met somebody, and just I cannot change their minds, you know, they're accountable, you know. If they want to think like that, that's their choice. But I don't know. That's and like I said, my kids, Maggie she's in the same class as your daughter, and I mean, she's got great friends. All the parents. I mean, my kids have best friends. I guess I don't know how to explain it, but it's just you guys have been good to us. And then another thing too, though. I mean, I know that at work, people. You know, you hear comments where, you know, people think the Mexicans don't pay taxes and you come illegally, and then the wall, all that stuff. You know, I guess I don't take it personal. I just think that, I don't know, ignorance, I guess, I don't know. But I do pay taxes, guys, so. So that's it, I guess.
When I was talking with Luis, he told me just how, yeah, I think like the way I know the police here is that my kids are friends with their kids, and I just loved that. I loved how we're all people, guys, and remembering that right now is super important. So this next submission comes from a Black woman who spent 4 years living here in Ripon, and she did ask for her name to be kept anonymous. An older lady near the pharmacy across the campus fell on the ground. I rushed to help her as she had groceries. She then started screaming for help because she thought I was trying to rob her. A bypasser then started to call the cops when I decided to take off. I was volunteering at a church on Sunday for children ministry. When a parent came to pick their child up and saw me, he was furious and stated that he will not be bringing his son back to church. A pastor in Ripon said that he would rather deal with Black people in Africa than African Americans because they nag and complain and want white people to do everything for them. This is when I stopped attending churches in Ripon. Wow. So up next, we're going to have Giselle come and share.
Hi, good morning. My name is Giselle Caulfield. My experience. It's been 11 years since I first came to Ripon. I think I was only one of 3 Black women living here at the time, at least that I know of. It was supposed to be a new beginning for us. My husband was starting a new job, and we had a newborn baby in arms. I love my house. I love my neighbors. But there was one neighbor that refused to speak to me, and does not do so even till today. Even when I say hi. I have been watched closely while shopping in stores in this town. And as a result, I always feel tension anytime I go into a store because I am thinking about what they are thinking about me. For certain stores, I'm yet to enjoy, a full pleasurable shopping experience because I'm thinking they are thinking I might try to steal something. And even when I don't have any reason to feel tense, I still do. The feeling is just there. It doesn't go away. But I've been blessed with some friends, a good circle of friends. My kids play with their kids quite happily. But I have to tell my children, some people are going to treat you differently because of the color of your skin. My daughter had the experience of a girl in her school telling her, "I don't like you because your mother is black." Another boy told her, "My daddy don't like black people." Just to name a few. I have to constantly tell her, you are beautiful. You are a designer's original. There's nobody on this earth like you. And everybody knows originals are worth more. I don't want her growing up to be a poor copy of somebody else. I can never buy my son a toy gun to play with. That's just a few of the things that, black mothers raising black kids have to, be concerned about. But I love Ripon. It's as good a place as any and better than many to be a minority raising a family. But we all have personal, conscious and unconscious bias towards people from other cultures or races. And I think it's up to every one of us to stick to dismantle those biases, wherever they may be, whether it be in the school, our law enforcement, our homes, and even in our thinking. So I'm happy today to stand together with you to promote an environment of change so that all can feel and be respected. Thank you.
I'm going to have our sharers stay up here, but before we move on to a time of reflection, can we just thank them again for their courage?
Come on.
What it means. Yeah. There's no way to, yeah. And there's more. We're going to hear from more. So, but first, we've processed a lot, heard a lot. We've listened to a variety of voices sharing their experiences, their thoughts, their reflections about the ugly reality of racism in our country and in our community. But we have also heard words of hope and encouragement. Right now, we wanted to give all of us an opportunity to reflect on what we have heard and learned. This is an opportunity for each one of us to point the thumb at ourselves rather than the finger at others, to probe our own hearts and minds, to be honest about our own thoughts, feelings, and experiences, and how they shape the way we think about the issue of racism. So we ask that you just be respectful by remaining silent during this time, and that we could all have the chance to reflect without distractions. And after that time of reflection, I'm going to ask Giselle to come up and pray with us. we now invite you to participate in whatever way you feel comfortable in a time of prayer.
Heavenly Father, we come in unity today. Lord, we come praying, oh God, to give us strength, give us the grace to dismantle the bias and indifference towards our fellow man. Help us, give us courage, oh God, to stand in the face of hatred and say no, enough is enough. Help us, oh God, to be the change wherever we are, wherever it is required of us. Let your perfect will be done in us and through us. The bottom line we know, Lord, is love. To love each other. Help us to love each other. And for those that find it hard, oh God, give us the grace to love people, oh God. Let your will be done. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So I'm going to, before I have Chief come up, if you guys want to stay up here, you can, or if you want to go back here. But thank you again for sharing. That was just awesome. Yeah. Wow. All right. So as we move into the response portion, I just encourage you guys, keep leaning in, keep opening your hearts to hear. And I'm so thankful to welcome up Police Chief Wallner.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there on this Father's Day weekend. I'm honored to be here today to represent the officers and staff of the City of Ripon Police Department, but I'm also here as a citizen and a resident of our community. I have to admit, when I was asked to say a few words today, I was a bit apprehensive, but then I started to think about the men and women that work for your community within your police department. And I've seen firsthand the great work that they do every day and the difficult position that they've been put in because of the events in Minneapolis several weeks ago. I feel their message is important, and how they feel about this community is important to be heard. I hope many of you were able to read my recent open letter to the community that appeared on social media and in the local paper. In that letter, I explained that your police officers working for your department had the same reactions you did on seeing the video of George Floyd's death. Every one of your officers joins me in condemning that incident and incidents like that. They were disgusted, they were angry, and they were saddened to witness what happened to Mr. Floyd. It was wrong, and it should not have happened, period. Now, one of your officers will defend any officer involved in that kind of behavior, ever. Those events and others across the nation have had an impact on how people perceive the police, and rightfully have citizens asking questions and demanding changes on how we police. Thankfully, our department has received a high level of support from this community. I believe that support comes from the fact that we have worked very long and very hard on earning that trust. We certainly are not without our naysayers, but a combination of community policing initiatives, education, and technology advancements have provided the basis for a lot of that support. It's something we work on every day, and it's part of the culture within our department. Our partnerships with organizations and groups within the community provides transparency and creates those relationships that are so very important in policing a community like ours. In 1829, Sir Robert Peel set into motion standards that still resonate today by indicating that the police shall maintain at all times a relationship with the public that gives the reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. Many of the much needed mandates to law enforcement that we see concerning police and the use of force changes that are being done around the country right now have for some time been instituted by your department. We have never, and will never, teach any type of chokehold as a compliance alternative by our officers. Our use of Force policies are available for review by the public at any time. In 2014, Wisconsin became the first state in the country to enact laws requiring outside agencies investigate officer-involved death. In 2015, your department became one of the first in the state and continues to be the only agency in Fond du Lac County that has body cameras issued to all of its officers. Our officers have received training on bias-based policing, racial sensitivity, ethics, moral reasoning, and professional conduct. That training is ongoing and continues. I believe that right now your department is the most highly trained and educated department that this community has ever had. But there's still work that needs to be done. Every organization should strive for continued improvement, and every community should demand that of its law enforcement. The initial training we give our officers is important, but continuing that training, updating the needs of the community are just as important. Law enforcement officers are human beings and they make mistakes. We have made mistakes. The key is that as an agency, we will address those issues, correct the problem. Our officers know that, and I hope our community knows that. When we bring someone into our family at your department, we first and foremost look at the character that they have internally. The officers and staff that work for you in your department, I consider some of the finest people I've ever known and of the highest character. That's important when you consider things like what happened to George Floyd. There was an officer who was directly responsible for Mr. Floyd's death, but the officers that did nothing to stop his conduct are just as responsible. That comes from character, and that comes from standards of the department. We tell your officers that as law enforcement professionals, you must work with all members of the community. What that community looks like will be constantly changing. Officers who know their communities and the various populations within those communities can work with all residents to ensure safety and safety of the people they serve. In addition, professional officers need superior communication and problem-solving skills in all cultures. Officers need to be respectful of and responsive to the beliefs, practices, and cultural needs of different people with diverse backgrounds. Officers must learn about the concept of implicit bias and how these biases can impact the perceptions and behaviors that we have as law enforcement officers. We must be fair in process, transparent in actions, provide opportunity for voice, and impartial in decision making. We believe that these components will advance a positive atmosphere that encourages innovation, conversation, and strengthens community relationships. But we cannot police this community and be held to those high standards the community requires without your help. The demands are simply too high. From racial inequality and inclusion issues to mental health, drug addiction, and other social needs, we must all work together as a community to address those issues. I encourage you to get to know your neighbors, meet someone in your community different from you, and hear something novel. Rather than sending a text or posting something on social media, actually talk to someone.
Come on.
You may disagree on issues, but you can still show respect to each other's views and opinions. A community our size is very fortunate to have educational opportunities to learn from others in a variety of ways. Shop at local stores, eat at our restaurants, get to know the owners and staff, stop with other police officers and introduce yourself, ask questions, attend a community event such as National Night Out. But most of all, be kind to one another. This community has historically been on the front lines of demanding racial equality and tolerance for our fellow man. More importantly, Ripon continues to be a community in which we treat other people with respect and are neighborly to our neighbors. If we don't stand together on these issues, we are sure to break individually. This has been and will continue to be what this community demands from its police department, and it should be what we demand from each other. Thank you.
That was just beyond amazing. And so much what, yeah, I think we we all really appreciate hearing. So thanks for being here. Thanks for all of you being here. So we're almost done here, and the rain is totally going to not rain on us anymore. Wow. So now that we've heard from our chief, I want to end our time today by sharing a few ways that you personally can work for unity and fight racism here in Ripon. This is something that takes continual and intentional work. So number one, start with your heart. Assess your role in this, your thoughts, feelings, and the message you are sending to others with your words or your silence. Take time to reflect on your own cultural development. Consider your feelings about other cultures and how that influences your day-to-day beliefs, thoughts, and behaviors towards others. As you have opportunities, number two, to speak with others in your circle, make clear your commitment to fight racism. Sometimes we can stay silent just to avoid making waves. Consider the influence you could have by adding your voice to the conversation. Number three, very similar to what Chief Wallner said, talk with people who are different than you. Start with empathy and seek to understand. Listen with humility. Experiences can change everything. And finally, number four, take time to learn. Read books, listen to podcasts, watch movies about the history of racism in our country. The library has provided right over here a sampling of some books available, and there are great movies all over the internet. Make sure to pass this knowledge on to your friends and your family, and especially your children. Tracy Taylor says that home is where you feel loved, appreciated, and safe. And as much as I thought that small town life would never be for me, after 9 years I have grown to love this place I call home. I love our sense of community and the way we come together, just as we are doing today. I can't help but think of a couple years ago when one of my dog went missing, and people I didn't even know searched the streets and countryside of Ripon during the polar vortex in the middle of the night, and this went on for days. One neighbor even jumped into their truck, rolled down their window with a pot roast in the front seat, just hoping to lure the dog home. So what if each day we committed to making this place home for all who live here, where everyone can feel loved, appreciated, and safe? So let us keep learning and stay engaged in healthy, respectful conversations, even and maybe especially about difficult issues. As fellow human beings, it is okay to agree to disagree. It is never okay to demonize, dismiss, or discriminate. May our unity not be the false peace that comes from shallow pretending that we are all the same, or that we all agree, or that everything is okay. Instead, let our unity be forged by the bonds of love and respect that lead us to commit ourselves to truly listening and learning from one another. I want to invite you guys to a worship night. It'll be for unity and healing at Hillside Church. There's postcards at that table. And I just want to thank all of you guys again. It's on July 3rd. You can literally drive your car up there. It's super cool. But I just want to thank you guys for being here. To all who are watching online, to those who bravely spoke today, and to all who helped make this event possible, may we leave from this place ready to continue the work that has begun. Thank you.